Hey guys, this is Asteria, and Wiggles is hosting today the after chapter discussion on chapter Wandering Inns, chapter 8.68. Enjoy!
Let's start out by going over what everyone's general impressions are of the chapter. Anything, uh, any overarching thoughts, how you felt about the chapter, all of that. And I'll start out myself, in that it reminded me of the starts of the last two arcs, basically, Hectival's arc and uh, Trey's arc as well, in that it was a lot of setup for what I believe is going to be a great conclusion at the end. But it's definitely, um, even though it's a huge chapter, it was basically two chapters combined into one in a lot of ways. It's setting up all of the all of the future conflicts we're going to see in the next couple of chapters with Ryuuko and uh, Rabbit Eater, and the focus on the battle in Mark's Pass. So I definitely liked the chapter, even though it was a bit on the long side for what it was. And but I mean, you could literally just split it in half and just do the Rabbit Eater and the Kara, or not Kara, the Ryoka portions separately, and it would just be two medium-sized chapters that work well. But yeah, it was a good chapter in my opinion. Anyone else? Just ping me in reactions and comments if you want to speak, or just type out what you want to say. Lord Panther says, I agree. I got the feel of two chapters of one and it being set up for all of the Tarandria plotlines. Lots of mentions of Calenfor makes me think they're going to be playing a role in the future. And yeah, I don't even think we've seen all of what is going to be coming from this place. Like, I feel like we're going to get some more of Calenfor, like their knights coming to the rescue, basically, in a lot of ways. But Landray, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, it feels like you said, that they seem like they're setting up for Calanfer to sort of prove that they are a bit more competent than they've previously seen. We keep getting mentions of the Light Warden, as if this is, or I think it was Light Warden that he was called, that seems to be this amazingly powerful knight. So I'm guessing on the level of a named adventurer who will eventually be coming into the story, possibly to hold the pass.
And his name is the Light Herald. And yeah, I definitely think we're going to see more of Calenfor here, simply because they're getting ragged on a bunch, you know? But I think they're going to, and as Chandler or as Crash always says, they come together in the darkest times. And that's what this is all setting up to be, I think. So I think we're going to see more of them, like you're saying. I see a few other people typing out what their impressions are, so I'm just going to wait a second to give them some time. And yeah, as Spanner points out, there are three princesses that are currently being um, under siege, so that gives Calendar even more incentive to come to their rescue, simply because they can't afford to let them be injured, really. Since losing three of their princesses in one go would be pretty bad. Lewd Dancer says, well, I should say Edge Dancer, says, I liked the plot lines coming together. I know this would extend an already over large chapter, but I would like to see other nations and their attitudes slash ties to the current conflict. That said, I thought the showing this chapter was pretty good. Mr. Europe, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this chapter. I really liked the coming back to Rabbit Eater parts, and I didn't mind that it was like the two split Tyrandria POVs. Uh, since it's basically a catch up chapter, I don't mind at all that they're just catching up every part of it. And it was also surprisingly the most I've enjoyed an Aelin Damos chapter in a while, like as a whole. There's always been great stuff with, especially with Agelum and stuff, but I really liked all the stuff they went into during the chapter.
I know you, Mr. Europe, I know you have in the past not liked how Ryuuko's been changing, I suppose, like how she's been getting less uh less angry about stuff, that kind of thing. Was that something you liked about this chapter? Was Ryuuko's characterization, or was it still something that you weren't as happy with?
I it was pretty good. I think I was really relieved when she said she wasn't going to go after the scroll anymore, because I think for a majority of the chapters she's been in Eilendamos, the it hasn't really been much of a feasible goal for her, and or at least we haven't really had a path to her getting it or getting anything, and she's just been focused on the one thing, and that's not really where Ryuuko shines, in my opinion. Like, she shines when she's actively doing something to get an objective and is focused like that, but when she's just sitting around and thinking, how am I going to get this objective, it's not Ryuuko at her best, really.
Yeah. Okay, so Coldbringer says, I liked the chapter a lot, didn't have any significant criticisms, just confused about the fundamental nature of auras. Pirate has never gotten around to explaining exactly what they are. I've been interpreting them as a One Piece-esque hockey system, a form of solidified soul magic that can only be wielded by the truly exceptional and brave. But then, how does someone have two auras? Isn't that like having two souls? What exactly is going on there? Might have preferred if it was explained as Rabbit Eater's aura was split, rather than having two auras. Be a representation of how split his narrative is between missing and wanting to protect home and wanting to go forth and be a champion. Um, yeah, I can definitely see like how that's a little bit confusing. I do agree with you that I would love to see more explanation about, just aura mechanics in general, since I think that's kind of the coolest magic we've seen so far in TWI. Spanish says, I like the split perspectives. I think that worked really well. I know Pirates said at the beginning of the stream they thought one perspective works best, or is liked best at least. I really like the contrast given here. And yeah, especially because I think this is definitely set up for having these two perspectives intersect more. Um, okay, so I think we've gotten all of the general impressions for the chapter, so let's move on to some of the questions. Um, well, real quick, Mr. Europe notes to Coldbringer's point that in the text there's a quote that says, a combination is rare and one entity denotes a conflict or event of the soul. Past history, perhaps. Okay, so let's go on to some of the questions. So first question I have here is, what was your opinion about the Lucifen's trial? Do you agree with the Lucifen being judges, or did you agree with Ryuko's sentiments? I'll start out, I guess. I don't. I definitely don't agree with Lucifen being judge, jury, and executioner and all that. Even if they're fully rational, it's still just a giant conflict of interest. Like, you're never going to be able to divest yourself that fully from being able to do this kind of judgment correctly if you're the ones directly benefiting from it. And I think you can see that in how kind of brutal their judgments are. Like, they're fair in the most literal sense, in that they don't consider a lot of emotional judgments, but in a lot of ways I feel that's doing a big disservice to how human beings, and I'm just gonna go with human beings being the template for most other races in in-world and how they operate. And not having that emotional aspect really kind of makes their judgment lacking. I definitely don't agree with how severe the punishment they made it for the lady in the trial, and I also don't agree with how the Eagles, I guess Eagles, I can't say his name. I can't agree with how he came to the fact that she should have been able to go to a guard because uh, things like battered woman syndrome exist where you can't really get out of a situation like that. You don't think you can ever go to someone else. You don't feel like you have that power. And I think they're really missing the kind of psychological understanding on that part, so they can't judge it properly. Landry, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I feel like it's a difficult one because no judicial system's ever going to be perfect. I mean, Ryuuko seems to go immediately for the Joy system, which is a deeply flawed system. Also, if they went for a more Americanized system, then they'd have elected judges, which is inherently a massive bias and leads you down the road of having a very vengeance-based system. I feel like the Luciferian are a bad choice, just like you said. They are very like emotionless and they lack the emotional context of a situation. They make the idea that everyone's going to be as sensible as them. So, oh, I'm being attacked. I just go to the guards. They don't take into account how a mortal human would feel. It's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But like you have the Angelium position on the opposite side of that position, and they also fail in how they would use things. They judge things entirely on emotion. Possibly there should be a combination of the two.
You know, that would be really interesting, but at the same time, like that's two extremes. I think maybe a combination of the two and a mortal race involved as well. So a three-way combination basically to get all viewpoints there. But that's a very interesting idea. I like it. Lewd Dancer says Luthen judging a murderer. That one is nice and marbled. I mean, really guilty. Really guilty. Sorry, Edge Dancer again. Edge Dancer. Spanner said it proved itself as biased. The second Visophican said they all saw the law differently to each other, whilst takes out the emotive response and being purely logical, you reduce it to the trolley problem. And yeah, there really is no solution to the trolley problem, and it just, eh, it's not a great system, but as Landry just pointed out, there aren't very many great systems, and a jury system has its own issues as well. Lord Panther says, I was against it at first, but showing the Lucifin arguing after the trial that they would come to different judgments made me feel like it's better, and the fact that they were willing to consider appeals. It was very interesting to me that they allow the condemned to choose their sentence. Yeah, that is an interesting point. Like you can choose to be experimented on if you think that is like something you want to allow, which is honestly, I don't even see a big problem with that. Like, I feel it wouldn't be popular among the general population, basically, but I don't morally have an issue with choosing whether or not you want to go into a labor camp or whether you want to be in morally gray kind of magical trials. Oshi, you wanted to speak.
Oh, can everyone hear me? Yes. Hey guys. So the thing about that trial, I, I wanted to reframe the question a little bit here. I found it wasn't the process that was the process wasn't objectionable because in our society, in at least the U.S., the goal is to produce exactly that, to focus on the letter of the law in practice, even if we oftentimes adjust sentencing and who gets what based on the spirit of the law. It's what we want, a logical very like measured response to everything based on what's possible. Not that we get there, humans being humans, but when I looked at the trial, my issues with it were the fact that the scope of what was used to judge it was a lot broader. The Lucifen looked at the underlying problems, what could have caused it, but they saw it as a critique of their own system. Hey, we set up all of these avenues for you to help. Why didn't you why didn't you make use of them? You could have made use of them. You should have made use of them. And they critique the choices that the person makes in their life. The issue for me was that there isn't any outreach. There's no like reach out to understand that the situation would have required, in order for her to end up in that situation, the murderer to end up in that situation, she would have had to have gradually been dropped into it. Abuse doesn't happen overnight. Someone doesn't experience abuse once; they experience abuse repeatedly before they lash out. And the critique should not have been. I mean, there was a hint that there would be talk about the family and about the guards and things, but you can't root out something like that in a trial. And I thought it was very odd to include that or incorporate it into the trial. It might have been a way for them to try to balance out the emotionless aspect of it. Because if you do incorporate the motivations and choices that people make outside of the act itself, then you're at least including the effect of those choices and the weight of those choices onto the trial. Because in modern society, we try to not do that. It's all about what happened at the event, establish the precise facts, the precise events, what does the law say is punishable and what is not, and what did each person do. Even in looking at motivation and cause and effect, we still do all of that first. But the Lucifen don't necessarily have to do that because they have so many tools to confirm everything so easily, and they don't necessarily look at motivation as a part of it because there's no jury. There's no, even an insanity defense would be easily resolvable because the Lucifen would know, hey, this person's completely nuts because they have magic, they have tools. It's just a really interesting system, and it's just not something that's easy to quantify or compare because they have different tools than us.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's very hard to make a direct comparison to our everyday lives just because of magic is there. You know, we have a bunch of different ways for their system to make sure it's working properly simply because of things we don't have available to us, and it's hard to judge based on that. Okay, so Kel says, I was fine with it given the arguments they made, the options they had for punishment, and that they took the extra step to deal with the family that aided and abetted the abuse. Lanray says, oh, I forgot something else is I thought that Lucifen should perhaps not be the judges, but perhaps prosecution, while the Agilum could serve as defenders. That'd be an interesting system. I don't know if the Agilum would make good defenders simply because I don't think they have I don't think they're well versed enough or they care enough about the law to make good arguments in that way. Edge Dancer says choosing their sentence was the most messed up part to me. Do you want to expand on that a little, Edge Dancer, while I read out these other things? Because just give a reason why you think it's the most messed up part. Coldbringer says the problem with the Lucifen isn't even necessarily their personal stake in the outcomes of trials. Yes, the existence of the Lucifen mandates that a certain number of executions have to happen year over year so that they can be fed. But that relatively mild corruption isn't a deal breaker owing to how limited in scope it is. They're only pursuing a minimal number of executions. They aren't seeking to maximize the number of executions. Like you'd see in some forms, of corrupt human justice systems. See the Pennsylvania Cash for Kids scandal. No, the problem is that their form of justice is blind, but justice without context is justice made cruel. They didn't interview or interrogate the woman's state of mind, mindset, psychology, motivations. They just looked at the plain facts of the case, but didn't seek to understand motivations and criminal intent, which makes the difference between murder and manslaughter. And yeah, that was kind of part of my point between the whole battered woman syndrome thing. Like the judge made a distinct point that there were officers around or guards around that she could have gone to, but psychologically, that's a very, very difficult thing to do in an abusive household like that. And it didn't seem like the Lucifin could understand that as well, or at least Eagles couldn't understand that as well. Kel says they specifically call out it was premeditated. Coldbringer says maybe the woman was scared or bad history with justice and an alien domus. Fact is, they didn't know. Mr. Europe says the idea of having a fantasy race dedicated to judging the law, provided they're incorruptible, honestly isn't the worst idea I've ever heard as a justice system. Granted, I think the criminal justice system in many first world countries here on Earth are utter garbage, so I'm not setting a very high bar. Spanner says maybe it is pirate dehumanizing the Lucifin even more, to Oshii on the abuse in the trial. Kel says, I mean, yes, they don't understand the psychology of abuse, but they did interview witnesses and family and everything. They were aware of watch activities in her area and their availability, etc. Edged answer on his choosing the sentence, their sentence was the most messed up part, says, sure, I just don't think the Lucifin have ever felt the emotional duress in that situation. Especially understanding medical ethics. It is very icky. Brings to mind of me experimenting on prisoners, which historically doesn't have a great track record. I guess my counter to that would just be, as long as you well inform these people about the kind of experimentations they'll undergo and you give them like a detailed outlook on what it would be like compared to, something like a labor camp, I feel like it's not ethically horrible. Also, while you guys are typing out these last few responses for this, I'm going to move on to the next question since we spent so long on this already. Next question is, auras were meant to counter something. Do they work against miracles or magic doesn't? Is that how Krulak beat up the Agelum? And while you guys are thinking of responses to that question, I'll read out Edged Answer's next point, that it should burden the state to imprison people. Okay, so onto this next question. My thought on it is, I think there are two ways to interpret that section, and I'm curious to hear what other people think, but I read it as, rather than it's being a counter to a miracle, it's just that the theory is not a very good theory. It's like there are counters and weaknesses and strengths to everything. So like Aura of the Brave, it at a higher level it'll specifically counter things like magic because it produces a huge anti-magic field. But at the same time, it's not going to counter, like archers or other warriors because it's not designed around that. So I don't think this is necessarily saying that auras are the counter to miracles and faith-based kind of things. They're just a counter that exists to anything in the world. But I would like to definitely to hear other people's opinions on this. And for that, Len Ray, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I feel like maybe the auras will come into it as we see the gods start to emerge. just on the basis that it keeps getting pointed out that they make you more resistant to fear and other mental effects. So possibly it will make you more resistant to faith and conversion. So the forcing of someone to accept the gods and such like, or some sort of mental influence the gods have over their worshippers.
So you think basically some like a stronger aura would make you more resistant to being, kind of led astray or led in that kind of way by the gods?
Yeah, basically, I feel like once the gods emerge, their strongest power is going to be over their followers and their followers converting. What we saw in uh Pisces' arc, where he met the followers of the prophet, it seemed like belief and faith are very intrinsic and are infectious in a way. Like we're seeing it as a mimetic attack, so possibly an aura prevents you from being affected by that as much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Simply because, especially because we've seen that auras are basically the personification of who you are. So being able to um, counter just like belief in general does make sense as a way to go about it. Mr. Europe, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, the main reason why I think this is because the first of all, the hint they dropped, as we discussed, the everything counters each other, and auras were supposed to counter something. The only thing that I could think of that fits in there that they would have forgotten would be faith. But also, based on how we saw in, for example, Pawn versus Belivier, um, faith kind of hard counters magic in many ways. We've yet to see magic actually be able to like circumvent that in any way. We've seen the only time we've really seen faith like fall apart is just for overwhelming force, and I think that there should probably be something that can work against it, and auras work very well in um, that slot to make sure, or to make sure faith isn't OP, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely we've definitely had a lot of discussions in the past about how magic seems to just be superseded by faith in a lot of ways. And I know some of the points that have been made that that's simply because faith is um, something that a lot of mages have. Oh, a lot of mages. Almost no mages have ever dealt with, so they just don't know the countermeasures to it. But if it's more of a trifecta type of deal where faith counters magic, magic counters auras, and auras counter faith, that does work too. All right, so while Edge Dancer is typing out what they want to say, I guess we'll move on to our next question, which is how many of you would like to own a magical cat that has flaming fur balls or flaming hair balls, no fur, and likes to wear clothing? I think that personally, just personally, a cat that sticks to the ceiling, clothed, and has some flaming hairballs is not a cat that I really want. You know, cats are a little too much already, and having them stick to the ceiling, staring at you, clothed like some dark little cultist, would terrify me a little bit. Kel says yes, definitely. Nods, yeah, but I don't know. I'm a little freaked out by those cats. Courier says that cat is not OSHA regulated. I don't think that cat can ever be OSHA regulated. I think it defies all regulations. Lord Panther says that wall climbing cat sounds like something out of my nightmares. Exactly. You get it. Now, if it's a dog that can climb walls, that's perfectly fine. Then that's a cute dog. Part-time Hermit says the Necromancer. All right. Puns. Blech. Mr. Europe says, to be fair, the dapper ninja cats do not have the flaming hairballs. While true, I still imagine them having the hairballs, okay? Coldbringer says, cats are already high maintenance, low affection, reward jerks. These regalias cats are that times 10. Glorifying bling for the 0.01%. They aren't even furry. Elle says, cats with tiny hats, though. Yeah, that would be kind of cute. Kind of. I don't know if it would make up for all the other issues, but it would be kind of cute. Part-time Hermit says, Pearl Chandler. Ugh. Blech. Edge Dancer, just to get back to the aura question, Edge Dancer replied that talked about this a bit in ACD Talks live chat. I feel like auras are a domain in a way. You are taking what is inwards and imposing yourself outwards. I think it is more a matrix in a way. Auras and faith impose outward and fight against each other, but are narrower in application. Magic and might are broad in application, but can be defeated when they come up against an absolute decreeing otherwise. That's definitely an interesting way to think about it. I hadn't even considered that. I like that kind of interpretation, though. Ren says, we need to go further with these magical animals, much further. As long as they're magical dogs, I can agree with you, okay? Magical cats, though, I don't know. Alright. Lord Panther says, reminds me of physics of minor and major forces, gravity / magnetism, in reply to Edge Dancer's comment. Alright. Ren says, magical naked mole rats. I don't, I don't know about that. Alright, let's move on to the next question. What question should we do? How will Princess Osaka use Ryuuko's advice to break from rules and traditions and level? Will she become an actor? Will she go fishing? What will she do? I personally don't know. Like, I don't even know if she will break from tradition. Like, in a lot of ways, I don't think you need to break from tradition that much to level like that. Like, you just need to find something that you personally uh, find motivating, find to be intriguing. I don't even think a lot of or princesses or other royalty have that drive in them to begin with, and uh, that's why they struggle so much to level. So as long as she has like a drive behind her and a passion to do what she wants, I think she'll level. So I don't know, but I don't know what that will be. Coldbringer says Osaka gets fostered at Veltra's Keep after Alien Dominus loses the war, calling it. That would basically be like them being betrothed, basically. Like, well, maybe not. I don't know. That'd be interesting, though. Edgeanster says, I don't think she will break from tradition. They are pretty open-minded in Alien Dominus, but I think Rebel Princess would be a very strong class and archetype. Well, as long as you keep rebelling, like it would be hard to rebel constantly over a long period of time for your entire life unless you have a dedicated goal you want to go for. Lord Panther says it just seems like there's something being set up with her to get out from under her overbearing mother. And yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, she is a pretty minor character at this point, as in we've seen her a couple chapters this volume. So I don't know if we'll ever get that kind of satisfaction out of it. But Landray, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I was thinking possibly Lionettes being introduced and sort of being referenced might be the bridge that sort of ends the war in a way. Like, I feel like this war is there's gonna be a big battle probably in the past. It will stalemate again. Eren will come back. Things will happen. But I think Lionette returning to Terendria is going to be the sticking point, and her becoming the worldly princess and going to Alien Darmus and sort of like introducing herself to the royals, the Veltresses becoming more involved with the Alien Darmus royalty, with the princess. I think that's where we're sort of going to end up going with that, possibly. I don't know.
Oh, the issue I have with that is just that she's never going to abandon Mersha, and so would Mersha go with her, or do you think something like Mersha would stay in the inn or something like that? I just don't see Lionette going to
I
Tarandra without Mersha.
I think she'd take Mersha, and I think you're going to see Mersha eventually be introduced to the court of Kalimfer. I think that's going to end up being a story arc as a adopted princess. And that's going to be weird and crazy because I think Knowles will want to move out of Israel.
I would definitely like to see that. I just don't know if we will, simply because Aaron's going to be revived at the end of volume. I'm still on my copium here, okay? So it's going to happen. We're gonna see Aaron, and Lionette's gonna be there for sure. But yeah, um, Lord Panther says I think Mersha would be fine with leaving Israel. Yeah, I don't think she would have a big issue with it as long as she has some way to come back. Edge Damper says copium addict. Yes, I am. Lion Ray says intercontinental door. Absolutely. I want that. I know a lot of people, not a lot of people, I know some people have an issue with her door being too powerful, but hey, it's fun. I like it. We should get more powerful doors, longer range, all over the place. All right, let's move on to the next question. How do you guys, what do you think, how does the General of Ages time magic work? And I'm asked this question because um at the end of the chapter, Risveri talks about her being a time general, basically. That she is a master of time magic. But at the same time, when we get to see her in action, it's described as her aura being enveloping the entire army. So I feel like instead of it being true time magic, like I forget his name, in Naristil, something like that. In the in Rahir, the Blighted Kingdom, instead of it being that true time magic, I think it's more her aura is completely based around time and speeding up time and aging, which is why instead of being able to like slow down time and being able to like reverse time, her aura only allows her to speed it up and age things around her. Um, Coldbringer says, in relation to the door comment before, the story is converging over time, which all but necessitates a longer range door eventually. Lanray, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I feel like she has to live through the time that she uses effectively. So while she's only 120 something years old, she's still 1600 years old in real time because she's had to spend so much time practicing her time magic, saying time too much. Um, it feels like that's probably the curse of like a lot of time mages, and why it'd only be really useful for an immortal who has enough time to spend. Like she says that it's spending every moment is something she's spending, so she's using her own life for her magic.
Yeah, that was a lot of my that was my interpretation as well. And I saw some confusion in chat about how she could be 120 while being chronologically 1600 years old. And yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking too. Is that um she herself can't stop time for herself, but she can manipulate it for everything around her in her aura, and that's how she's only been born 120 years ago inside of Alien Domus, but is still a 1600-year-old half elf. Mr. Europe says, based on the out of time thing, I'm guessing it is like White Nulls except with time instead of luck. Also, I want as many time puns as that dumb Justin Timberlake movie In Time from her. And then, how appropriate, Part-Time Hermit says, it's actually time magic since she's a seasoned general. Thank you, Part-Time Hermit. We're all so glad for your puns here. I'm so happy with your puns. Lord Panther says, I'm curious if the time magic is going to play a part in the lore given earlier that goblins are actually long-lived and Rabbit Eater is going to be best to survive against her because he can now produce his own food and water and in battle against her. I don't know if it will... I don't know, like, sieges, when you plan for sieges, you're planning for like months on end. I don't know if Rabbit Eater himself alone will be enough to account for that kind of supply line issue, if there is one, but we'll see. Coldbringer says Dion Mella is a powerful but fundamentally shitty time wielder compared to Nerishil. She can affect large areas, entire armies, but she can only move time forward with herself as the center of the aura spell. She sacrifices lifespan for powerful effects, but has no versatility compared to Nerishil, who has made himself and the Blighted King effectively immortal with delicate healing adjacent uses of time magic. And he's still got army-wide power effects, as we saw during the Sylvania battle. As Janser says, she's making time pass faster in the zone. Don't think it is super crazy for it to be either magic or aura, nor does it matter. She was a mage, and we have seen auras based off of a mage's magic before. Like Saria's and her use of frost magic, basically, or frost aura. Kill says, kind of like the time turner in Harry Potter, time goes on normally for other, but she's living through all the time that's turned back. Okay, I think that's all we've got for this question now. Let's move on to the next. Anyone have any theories on where safety is located? I know that we got some hints this chapter that well, not even hints. It was directly outright stated that Kara has allies among the half elves. So, do you guys think it's a half elf kind of deal or something else? Because my current theory right now is some form of half elf village somewhere out there, or a half elf city is where safety is. Maybe not a city, just a forest in one of the half elves' forests. They've partitioned off a section for safety. Pat says Darethil Vel, maybe, and yeah, that's still an option since we know that she has dwarf allies. Lonroy, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I wonder if it's completely off the wall theory, but if they have access to one of the hidden places in the Kingdom of Keys. So if they found a key and that was what they were using as their safe space, because they could enter it from anywhere effectively.
That would be, I would be amazed if that's it. Like simply because we haven't had any foreshadowing for it, but that'd be an actually really interesting place for it to be, since I want to see the Kingdom of Keys. As soon as we heard about that place, with it being kind of a kingdom based around doors and being completely safe because there's a giant door blocking everyone, it's cool. Sorry, I got interrupted for a second. Coldbringer says rural half-elf village. Yeah, that's part of my theory too. Mr. Europe, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I was also going to bring up the Kingdom of Keys, but just in general, we've brought up the like the three possible choices that have been said so far are the Kingdom of Keys, the Dwarven Kingdom, and Dareth Vel, and the rural half elf villages. And aside from that, we don't really know of any other place. So unless it's completely out of left field, the only other option would be something from Gravesong, which we're not really, I don't think we're talking about spoilers there, but
Yes, just
there, for people who've read it, there is one probable place, but yeah, not
yeah.
really very hospitable.
As long as Gravesong isn't fully released yet, we'll just like not do any spoilers for it in these kinds of discussions. But I do understand what you're getting at with that, and I do agree that it's likely even. I feel like. Okay, so Ray says another totally left field option would be another dragon throne. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. And then we've been going on the recording now for about an hour, so we'll do a question or two more and then we'll wrap it up. So, next question is do you agree with Ryuuko or Kara's stance on the proliferation of technology? What I mean by that is, do you think Ryuuko's constant, um, constant trying to stop all proliferation of technology is correct, or do you agree that with Kara that it's practically inevitable and there is no way you're going to be able to stop it, so might as well use what you have? And I definitely agree with Kara's viewpoint there because there's, at least 100 or so Earther humans out there, and some of them are going to be people that want to get technology out there. If there's maybe like one or two people in the entire world, you can, somewhat stop the proliferation of technology. But when there's so many people out there and there's so many avenues for it to come through, there's no real way for you to stop it. And so you should be utilizing it to your advantage. You should be using it and trying to make the best situation for yourself that you can, because if you don't, other people are going to uh, do it for you, and you're going to be at a giant disadvantage in the end. Edge Dancer says, Kara, it's literally already too late. And yeah, exactly it is. Lenray says, Kara, Ryoka is far too in her own head with her protagonist syndrome. And Snick Boy has cannons. Yeah, he does, which is sad. Edge Dancer says, that doesn't mean you should give everything away as quickly as you can, but a large group of immature people cannot keep a secret. And it's absolutely the case. It's impossible to keep this kind of thing under wraps when there are too many people involved. Mr. Europe says, Kara is definitely correct now. It might have been a good idea at some point, but it clearly doesn't work anymore. There are already guns and or bombs on 3 continents. Yep. Ren says, definitely Kara. Alright, I think we're all in agreement now that Kara is for sure correct. I don't see any dissenting opinions here, so let's move on to the final question. Ren also says it would never have worked long or even medium turn. Yeah, especially, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the final question of the recorded segment. I had one that I wanted to read for the last one. Oh yeah, here it is. Where do you guys see this arc going? And any thoughts you might have on what the contributions of each character will have? How will Ryoka's part intersect more with rabbit eaters? That kind of thing. Um, Basically, it's just a question of what are your predictions for what's gonna happen in the next few chapters. And for me, I think we haven't even seen like the tip of the iceberg about what's going to happen. Like we have um Rabbit Eater trapped in the pass along with three of Calenfer's uh princesses. I think that will very much so give Calenfer a big reason to get even more involved. And I think in the end, Ryoka and Kara are going to kind of split on their ideals when it involves alien dominance. I think Ryoka will see a lot more of the good that alien dominance has, whereas Kara is very focused on all the bad things that alien dominance brings to the table. So I feel like they're going to have a kind of split in some way on how they feel that they need to deal with alien dominance and deal with their involvement in this war. So I think it'll be interesting to see where it can go, and I'm also interested in how Rabbit Eater is going to tie in to all of this because he's one of, if not the highest level soldiers, knights, champions in that keep, and he's definitely a serious factor that they'll have to consider. And I wonder how he's going to do things, what he's going to do, how he's going to influence people, and all that. Lanray, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I don't think we're going to get a resolution before Eren wakes up from this arc. I think that's going to be one of the things she tries to solve. Um, I think we're going to see, like you said, Ryoka possibly seeing some of the good in Ali and Damus, but I think Kara is going to show her a lot of the hidden corruption and evil as well. So far, she's just heard their side of things, and now she's starting to learn about the really dark stuff. On the other hand, Rabbit Eater is sealed in the fortress for an extended siege, so possibly a harem comedy.
Yeah, you're definitely right that Kara's outside perspective of alien dominance is definitely going to influence Ryoka, but at like the same time, Ryoka is in love with mortals, in love with immortals. It's like she can't get enough of them, and she sees like all these ones behind the scenes in alien dominance, and I feel like she's going to side with them in the end simply because she doesn't want them to all go away. Um, Lord Panther says, I think Seraphil's Knight and Rabbit Eater will hit things off during the siege and become drinking buddies. Ryoka's next stop will be a meetup with Eldvin and a tussle with the wannabe Iron Men. I don't think any of them will make it back to the inn for Eren's reawakening. Yeah, I definitely don't think anyone here is going to be at Eren's reawakening. That's absolutely true. Well, actually, maybe if Eldvin dies, his simulacrum um dies around the end of the month and he wakes up back in his body, he might be there. Maybe, possibly. I guess it's something that could happen. I don't think it will happen, but it could, maybe. Um, Part-time Hermit says Seraphil becomes a princess knight, Sir Eiffel. Puns. Puns are the death of me, okay? I can't do with them. I can't do it. Mr. Europe says, this is all assuming Aaron comes back in Israel and her in. They might make it to Liscor before her if she gets rezzed in Celt. At this point, I feel like it's almost guaranteed that it's going to be in Liscor because they haven't made any preparations at all to try and go to Celt. They haven't, mentioned that at all. And I feel like that's something that would be mentioned at this point. That would be foreshadowed a little bit. Like it's kind of foreshadowed in that it's a possibility, but it's not been foreshadowed as something that they might do. So at this point, I'm definitely leaning towards Aaron's going to be revived in Israel rather than Celt. Landray says Teriarch wakes up in his cave at the end of the month, assumes it was all a crazy dream, fails to notice the teen dragons who have moved in. Kel says, I really wanted her to res and Kells to force her out of her comfort zone and also make the Horns escort her back to Lascorgan. I don't think it's like outside of the realm of possibilities, by the way. Like that, I still think that's something that could happen. I just think, maybe like it's an 80% chance she's going to revive in Liscor or 20% chance it's going to happen in Celt, something like that. It's just a lower possibility at this point simply because it hasn't been foreshadowed as much as reviving in Liscor has. Mr. Europe says, unless we're nowhere close to resing. Volume 9 midpoint res arc. I can't. Okay, we're not going to get into how wrong I think that is, but you're wrong, Mr. Europe. Okay, we have a bet on this. We all know I'm going to win that bet. You're going to lose. And yeah. Ren says they're moving everything to the end currently. And yeah, that's why I think it will be in the end, simply because that's where they're all headed. That's what their plan is. Edge Dancer says this arc will end when Rabbit Eater uses his newly learned skill Helmet Eat at Eldiven, tapping him on the dead. I'm pretty sure you mean on the head, and reconnecting him to his dragon self. Terry and Riss become best friends after Terry outbids the Fake King. Terry is like, could you not, please? Riss is like, okay, draw me? Dragon homie? Okay. That's a weird acronym, or whatever you want to call it, shortening. All right. I'm just waiting for the last few people to type out their responses to this question, and then we'll stop the recording. Kel says, Dromi, not draw me. Dromi? Dromi? Dromia? I'm not good at pronunciations, Kel. Okay. Landre says, I think she'll have Rez and Liscor, but the ghosts will have to cross the sea to get there, while the former rulers of Kelt hold back the gods and Cthulhu's, losing many of her friends in the process. The survivors will stay in the garden. All right. On that cheery note, we're gonna be ending the recording now.
So that's it for today's discussion. See you guys hopefully next time.